This is about economies of scale, perfect competition, and international trade. So far, we've been talking about different theories that motivate international trade. In fact, we were talking about basically differences across countries. So it was because countries differ, that is the reason that is going to lead to international trade. We've been talking about differences in terms of technology, that was the Ricardian model. Also, we've been talking about differences in terms of resources. If one economy was abundant in capital versus the other economy was abundant in labor, or vice versa. So, though that trade that is coming from differences is what is known also as inter-industry trade. So it's when one economy is going to sell one specific good while the other is going to sell the other good. So we can see trade between the economies, but the goods are different. Okay? All those theories, so I'm talking about the Ricardian model, the specific factor model, and the Heskerodian model, which is the long-run version of the specific factor model. All of this theory, of the different theories that we have here, correspond to what is known as the old theory of international trade. Now, in this chapter, is something completely different. Now we're going to see like countries really or pretty similar. We can even assume that countries are identical. The result is going to be basically the same. And even in that case, in which countries are really similar or even identical, we are going to find trade. But this trade is not coming from differences across countries. It's not because one country has a technology that is better than the other economy, or because one country has a resources that is in that specific country is abundant while in the other is scarce. It's nothing about that, okay? In fact, this trade theory, which is the new trade theory, is talking about that trade that we can see between economies pretty similar in our real life. So, well, here we are talking about trade between countries that can be rich country versus poor country, so they are really different. Here we are going to talk about that trade that is between countries pretty similar, rich economies. So, for instance, it can be the case of trade between the United States and Canada, which both economies are pretty similar. They have a common history, they have a common language, and similar industry. So basically, in general terms, they are pretty similar. Also, countries like the European one, we can observe that also there's going to exist trade. In this case, this kind of trade is going to be between goods that are eventually, or we can say, the same good. So that's why we call this trade as intra-industry trade. So it can be like, for instance, in the case of Europe, we can observe people from Italy buying cars from Germany and vice versa. So German citizens buying Italian cars. So it's the same good, it's just cars. But we can see that even each economy is able to produce cars, we are going to see that there is going to be an international flow of cars. So that is intra because it's in the same industry, the automobile industry in that case, okay? So as I said, this is going to be the new trade theory, and it's going to be in a context of economies of scale. So this is going to be one of the main concepts of this chapter. We are going to talk about two kinds of economies of scale. One is going to be external, and in that case we are going to talk about externalities, while the other is going to be the internal economies of scale, and we are going to say just economic of scale. So when we talk about just economic of scale in general, it's going to be those economies of scale that are taking place inside of one firm, of one company, while the other is when we are considering a group of companies, okay? In this context, or to get the better use of these economies of scale, we have to live in a market that is in imperfect competition. So you must know already something about competition. So we can find like two extreme cases. Perfect competition is one kind of market where all of the buyers or sellers has perfect information about prices. Also, they have information about the goods. In that context, the good is like homogeneous. Doesn't matter who is the producer, it's just the same goods. Let's say, for instance, cereals, or better say tomatoes. It doesn't matter who is the producer. In general, tomatoes are just tomato. So it's a homogeneous good. We have many producers of tomatoes. We have many buyers of tomatoes. So eventually, the price is really small, and it's going to be always the same price. So that is a case of perfect competition, because we have many producers, many consumers, the price is fixed in the market, no one is able to change the price, all of them are price taker, and the information is pretty good. We know the price of tomatoes in general, okay? The opposite is the monopoly, where we just have one producer and many consumers. In that case, the producer is the one that is going to fix the price, because it's the only producer, so it can choose that price, and it's going to get always a profit that is going to be pretty big. But here we are going to be in a context that is a combination of both, okay? In fact, we are going to talk about the monopolistic competition concept. But we are going to see that later on. So far, we've been talking about models in which we observe that comparative advantage. So one economy has a comparative advantage in the production of one good, while the other, it was in the other goods, okay? Now, as I said, we are going to see that we can also observe countries with trade where both of them has the same technology, so the same production capacity given the resources. So now it's going to be, it doesn't have to be comparative advantage, difference in between these economies in terms of comparative advantage. Well, in that case, when we're talking about this context, also there was another additional assumption, that was that each firms was facing constant returns to scale. What is this? Well, scales refers to the capacity or the size of one firm. If you change your scale as a firm, means that you change the number of labor and capital that you're using in that company, okay? So let's say, for instance, a higher scale, you are increasing your scale when you are hiring more people, more workers, and also you are buying machines. So in that case, your scale is going to be higher. When we were talking about this model that was based on differences in terms of comparative advantage, one of the assumptions that we had, it was like these returns of scale, it was constant. What is a return? Return is the output that you are getting, okay? You introduce input, that production factors, and you get output, which is the production. And it was constant. What is the meaning of that? So imagine that you are a producer of bread. If you have a firm with a size, with capital, and also labor, and you introduce an additional input like can be cereals to produce that bread, among other ingredients, but just say that you just need cereal, you are going to get an amount of bread, okay? If you double your investment in that industry, so instead of just one firm, you have two firms, you are going to have the double of bread, okay? That is the meaning. It doesn't matter if you decide to have like two companies, one in one place and the other in another place inside of the same economy, or if you decide to have just one firm, but the size is the double. In both cases, the production is going to be the double, because you have made an investment which is the double size of the previous one, then the production is going to be in the same proportion. That's why it's constant. So the returns are constant respect to the investment that you are doing. If you multiply by 3 your scale, then the returns, so the output is going to be multiplied by 3. So that's why it's constant returns to scale. It takes the production change in the same proportion as your scale. But now, in this new model, one important aspect that is going to be different to respect to that one is that instead of having constant return to scale, we are going to have increasing return to scale. What is the meaning of that? The meaning of that is, okay, if you have previously, sorry, I forgot the serial. You have one firm, and also you have the raw material that you are using. You are going to have an amount of bread, is the same, but it's not going to be the same if you decided to, imagine that you're deciding to double your size. So if you double your size, we are going to see that the production is going to be higher. It's not going to be just the double, it's going to be more, okay? So here it's not going to be the same. Having two firms or having just one firm with a really high size. Let me develop a little bit this issue, that it can be a little bit difficult to understand. We are going to be in a context in which each firm is going to face a really significant fixed cost at the beginning. So if you want to produce, let's say if you want to produce bread, now you have to buy an oven, and that oven is going to be a really big oven, really expensive. So to start to produce, you need a lot of money, which you have to pay that oven, which is really big, a big oven. So the main thing, or the main efficiency, is try to use that oven as much as you can, because it is really big, okay? It's really big. So if you decide to double your size, so if you want to produce more than before and you double the investment that you have been doing, now you already have that oven. That was the expensive part. The only thing that you can spend your money now is with more raw material, more labor, more small machines that also are useful. So, and because the fixed cost, it was already paid, that money, you can save that money for the other things. So you are going to produce a lot. Imagine a really big oven. Now you are introducing more labor, more flour, more ingredients that you need to produce bread. Now you are able to produce a lot. The problem is, if instead of making or introducing that money in that firms, making that firms bigger than before, instead of that you decide to have another firm in another place. In that case means that you need to buy a new oven, which is really expensive. So that money that you are using in the buying of the oven is not going to be used in the production of bread, in the actual production of bread. So it's not going to be so efficient. So far, we've been saying that in general, all the industry were facing this constant return to scale. So it doesn't matter if you make your firm bigger, the double, or you have another firms in another place. But now, because we are going to talk about some industries, some firms that has to face a really big fixed cost at the beginning of the production, it's not going to be the same result. So if you decided to produce more in the firm where you already have that ovens, the production, the output is going to be higher than if your decision is buying a new oven. Because if you buy a new oven, that money that you are spending in the new oven is not going to be spent in the input or raw material that you need to produce bread. If that money it was used in the production of bread, you could get more production, more output than just buying more machines that like the oven that you don't really need. Because as I said, that oven is really huge, it's able to produce a lot. The only thing that you need for producing more once you have the oven is just the raw material that the bread needs. So that's why we are going to see like firms, instead of having many firms in different places, they just prefer being in one place, produce as much as possible and sell that good across all the world. Okay, so it's just in that way in which you are really using the oven that you bought, which is really expensive but also is really productive, and you are going to be able to like smell that fixed cost that you have to face at the beginning of the production. Otherwise, imagine that you have buy that oven just for producing that one unit of bread. That unit of bread is really expensive because you have to cover the cost of the big oven. Instead of just producing one unit of bread, you produce hundreds and hundreds of units of bread. It's like you are going to be more efficient. You are going to be able to get back the money that you have invested in the production of ovens. So in that case in which you have to face a really big fixed cost at the beginning to start to producing, the best idea is not buying more ovens. It's just that oven as maximum as you can do it. By doing in that way, you are going to get revenues. So your goal is going to be produce all of you can, invest all the money that you have in more input for that fixed initial fixed cost for that oven, and then sell the maximum amount that you can produce. So the best thing is international trade, because thanks to international trade you are going to have not just the consumer of your country, but also you are going to be able to export, so produce even more, produce for other consumers in different countries. So, and remember, more production means that the cost of each unit of bread is going to be lower because you are using that oven for the production of many units of bread. So each unit of bread is going to like support part of the fixed cost that you face when you bought that oven. So as conclusion, production is most efficient as larger is the scale. So that means as bigger is just one firm instead of having many firms where each of them has the same oven, really expensive one, and that oven is not really used as well as it could be because you are spending money in many ovens instead of spending money in the input that you need, the raw material that you need to produce bread and then use the oven. Okay, so that is going to be the main difference. That is the reason why it's going to be really interesting have more consumers across the world. The other characteristics that was in those models with comparative advantage differences was that we were in a context of perfect competition in all of the markets. What is the meaning of perfect competition? Well, we are talking about perfect competition, that is something that barely you are going to see in real life, but the main description of that is when we have many producers, small producers, but many consumers. Also, we are going to talk about a good which is going to be homogeneous, as I was saying, imagine just tomatoes or potatoes or things like that. Well, it doesn't matter who is the producer, you just look at the price, right? You are not just looking one specific brand or something like that, or one specific industry which is really good producing that good. Well, in general, they are homogeneous. So homogeneous means that the characteristics of the goods are equal across all the producers. So you don't care about who is the producer, you just care about the price, right? So also we are going to see that both producers and consumers are price takers. So the price is fixed in the market, we are going to have just like a demand. This is the price of the good. Here we have the production of the good, the quantity, so the demand is negative slope, so downward slope, which means higher is the price, lower is the demand, and vice versa. And we are going to have like a supply, and here is the price, okay? The price is fixed in the market. No one is able to change that price, okay? So, and eventually the result is the profit. We use this letter for profit is 0. So producers just are able to cover the cost of the inputs, so the production factor that they are using. But the benefit is 0, the profit is 0. Now we are going to talk about a different context. Instead of perfect competition, we are going to talk about monopolistic competition, which is the combination of perfect competition and a monopoly. In fact, we are going to have, okay, not as many producers as here we have, but, well, some producers. Yeah, not so many, but some producers. It can be also a big number. Many consumers, that is going to be equal, but here is the key. We are not going to have an homogeneous good. In fact, we are going to have a differentiated or heterogeneous good. What is the meaning of that? Well, we are going to see that the goods, though essentially we are talking about the same good all the time across all the firms, they are going to have certain characteristics that are going to make that specific good for one specific industry a little bit different to respect of the goods that is produced by a different industry. Okay, so though essentially it's the same good, but it's like consumers are observing differences. These differences can be horizontal or vertical. So it can be in terms of quality. So it's the same good, but the quality is different. The material or the fabric that is used for the production of that specific goods is not the same in one company to the other. Also, it can be in terms of just design. One is nicer than the other. So we can see differences in different aspects. Though the good is the same, you like feeling different. It's like Coca-Cola. You can see that people just want to buy that brand instead of a different brand. It's the same, it's cola. In both cases, you have many different variety of cola, but it's the same. But it's like people just want to buy Pepsi, or there's going to be people that just want to buy one specific brand, okay? Or the same is happening with cereals. We have many cereals, but it's like all of them are a little bit different from the other. I just prefer, or I rather prefer cereals with, I don't know, with chocolate or with something which is a little bit different to the other, or better quality or whatever, okay, or just marketing, okay. So also we are going to see that this is not going to be true anymore. In fact, producers are not going to be price taker. Consumers are going to be price taker, but producers are going to choose the price of their goods. How is that possible? Because, as I said, now we're going to see that each company is going to try to produce something that is going to be a little bit different. Okay, it's like I'm a producer of mobiles. In fact, I'm going to produce. I decided that I'm going to produce iPhones. iPhone is a mobile, but it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to give a different design, more quality in some aspects, a better, attention for the consumers. I'm going to teach to my consumer how to use my machine. And consumers are going to see that my good is different, so they are willing to pay more to me than to other companies. Though it's a mobile in both cases, but they feel like my good is unique. So that's why we are talking about monopolistic competition. We have competition because there are many producers. Well, sounds not as much in the other case, but there are quite producers, competition, so we can see competition, but it's monopolistic because each producer is going to produce something special, something different. And as close you are to something different, like consumers are going to see you like unique. So, monopolistic. So that's why producers here are going to be able to fix a different price, each producers. So the profit, it doesn't have to be zero, at least in the short run. In the long run, the thing that we are going to see is competition is there. So it's going to prevail. If I see that one of my competitors is making more money than me, I'm going to change my production. It's going to change my goods because I want to get that profit. So eventually, in the long run, the profit of each company is going to be zero. But in the short run, which is the time in which we are living, the long run is something theoretical, okay? The short run is the actual real life. In the short run, we are going to see that each company is going to have a profit. But theoretically, in the long run, the profit is going to be zero because we have competition, and eventually it's going to come in a different company, Samsung, whatever, that is going to take my consumers. So my profit is going to be zero. Okay, as I said, one of the important differences here is we are going to talk about economies of scale. As I said previously at the beginning of this chapter, we are going to have two kinds of economies of scale, external and internal. Well, normally when we're talking about economies of scale, normally we are talking about this internal economies of scale. So sometimes it's not going to be specified which type of economies of scale we are talking about, and that is because we are talking about this one, okay? Internal economies of scale, which already we have been talking about this. Well, external economies of scale. Here, the important thing is coming from the side of the industry. It's not about the side of one company or the firm, it's about the benefits of being close to other companies that are from your same industry. So the main idea is you are going to get like a benefit of being in one specific cluster instead of being alone, and you can be very high, very big industry, but it's not as good as being here with around it many other industries like you. We are going to see that that for some specific industry, not all of the sectors, okay, but for some specific sectors, it's going to be pretty beneficial being close to other companies as you. Okay, one example of that, probably the most famous one, is the Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, you're going to have many companies, all of them are about electronic things. I don't really sure about what is that, the main things that is in Silicon Valley, but basically all of them are producing the same thing, and they are really good, they are producing a lot, and that is tends to be together, okay? So they are competitors, but sometimes it's good to be close to your competitors. You are going to get an extra production that is coming from the side of the sector, from the side of the cluster, instead of the side of just the company. Okay, that is external economies of scale. Okay, the other kind of economies of scale is the one that we've been talking about already. That are the internal economies of scale. That is increasing returns. So remember, we've been talking about the assumption of constant returns in terms of scale. That was for the case of the old model theories that was about differences across comparative advantage across country. Now we're going to see that the economies of scale are going to be increasing. So that is going to be for different industry than this one. And we're going to see that it's better being really big instead of having two firms. It's better just having one firm and then produce a lot from that industry. Okay, it was the case of the oven. It's better just having one big oven in one place and produce a lot from that place. Okay, Instead of buying 2 ovens in 2 places, and then the rest of the money that you have, use it for each company. In that case, you're going to produce less than if you just invest all the money that you have in one industry. And that was because the fixed cost of starting to produce, it was really high. So when you have to buy a really expensive oven, it's better just buy just one and then try to produce all of your demand, produce that goods there, instead of having 2 ovens in different places, okay? Because then the money that you have, the rest of the money that you have is going to be less money, because part of the money will go for the buying the other oven. So you're going to produce eventually less. So we are going to talk about internal economies of scale when one company has to face a really high fixed cost at the beginning. So in that context, the thing is that the average cost of each output or production is going to be decreasing. So here the output, it was bread, as you remember. So the average cost of producing 1 unit of bread, that average cost is going to depend on the total output of production, in the way that as higher is the production that you are doing, the average cost is going to decrease. What is the average cost? It's the total cost that you face, as we will see in the coming points, the total cost over the total output or total production of bread. This thing is, your cost is really expensive because it's really high, because you have to face the buying of the oven, but as higher is the production that you are generated, the average cost of each unit of bread is going to decrease. Okay, so as higher is, because part of that is going to be fixed, as higher is this is going to be smaller. Remember, the simple example of this is, if you just produce 1 unit of bread, that unit of bread is going to be, the cost is going to be huge, because the cost is the buy of the oven, which was really expensive, also the ingredients that you use for the production of that unit of bread. Instead of 1 unit of bread, you produce 2 units of bread. Now you split the cost. So the average cost per unit of bread now is going to be just half of the previous one, and so on. That's why the increase of production in that context is going to be associated with a reduction of the average cost per unit of bread.